Before long, we became a team. Yes, we were thieves, but I tried to hold us to a certain standard. We never harmed anyone, and we only robbed from those who would feel it the least. But everything changed when we met the wizard, Sofina.
Okay, let's all go. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? It's a show where we talk about movies, and specifically, we talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, aka TV's Travis. This is episode number 306, and our movie this week from 2023 is Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. And here to talk with me about it, because he had not seen it, the full run-through, Tyler. How you doing?
I am well. How are you?
I am doing quite well. All right, so you had not seen this before. I do notice, though, you're wearing a Dungeons & Dragons shirt. So my first question to you will be, why is it you hadn't seen this movie yet?
So I feel like when you said it came out in 2023, that kind of blew my mind because it felt like it had just come out. Like in my brain, it did come out. I mean, I guess 2 years ago isn't too long, but it felt like it was a bit more recent than that. So I guess it would have come out the first year that I actually attended Dragon Con, and I think they played it at Dragon Con. I'm not 100% sure, and I was like, oh, I should probably go and watch it there. I think the one thing keeping me from it, and we'll get to it as we progress down the line through the movie itself, it's that looking at the previews, there was already too much stuff not D&D in what they were calling a D&D movie that I think it just tricked my brain into thinking you're not going to enjoy this. So I think it was just a very stay away from it because you already know you're going to be angry.
Okay, all right. So what kind of a history do you have with Dungeons & Dragons itself, the game or any of that kind of stuff?
Playing off and on since right out of high school. I actually started with Pathfinder, which Pathfinder itself is a 3.5 spinoff. And what like Dungeons and Dragons moved on to 4th edition, Pathfinder kind of stayed behind and branched off into its own thing. Then I had some friends of mine that wanted to do Pathfinder. We played a little bit of that just to kind of dip my toes in it. Then moving on to D&D itself a handful of years later, probably settling down, unfortunately, right at 2020. So right at the time when you couldn't play in person.
Right.
Maybe a little bit before that, because I do remember a group of friends and us, we got together and then we were about to move on to the next half of our campaign when we actually couldn't start playing in person. Then I moved on and played with another group of people actually online. And that was the first kind of full storyline that I had managed to play from start to finish.
Okay. So you've got some gaming experience. You've sat around a table, you've rolled some dice, you know how it goes. That's good.
Right.
I actually my history with Dungeons and Dragons, I'm a bit older. It goes back a bit farther. My first Dungeons and Dragons games were 2nd edition or advanced Dungeons and Dragons at the time.
So then you probably recognize some of these.
I do. Yes, I do. So that's where I got started.
Yeah. I have a collection of 2nd edition books that actually our neighbor was moving and found all of these in an old box and passed them on.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. So that's how I got started. Then I moved away from it for a while, and it was nothing other than just kind of time in high school. I spent a lot of time doing cross country and track. That ate up a lot of my free time.
Right.
I got back into it, played some, 3rd edition, 3.5. I've dabbled with Pathfinder. I have a group of friends that we meet usually every couple of weeks. It's all scheduling, right? That's the hardest part when you get to adulthood. And
I've always joked around that the fact of that's the biggest BBEG in any D&D campaign is time management. Yep.
But we played Pathfinder, we played Starfinder, we've done Vampire the Masquerade, we've done Call of Cthulhu, as well as D&D. We always kind of come back to, we've got a couple of rotating kind of ongoing campaigns we'll jump in and out of, or we'll do sort of a few sessions like an adventure and then move on to something else, or maybe grab a pre-made adventure and do it. So like a lot of dice roll and a lot of playing around the table. When I saw this announced, I was all about it and I was ready to go. The funny thing is, you mentioned how, yes, the movie came out in 2023, which one feels like forever ago and also feels like not that long ago. Cause let's face it, the last month has been a hell of a year. It was actually filmed in 2021. So they filmed everything in 2021. It was going to have a late 21 release or early 22. And they, because of the pandemic and everything, it kept getting bumped back and it ended up coming out in 2023. So, and which I think in some ways benefited the movie, in allowing them maybe some more time to polish a few things that, that otherwise could have felt rushed or could have looked rushed. But, as a film, now that you kind of were forced almost to watch it, I sort of, sat you down and said, look, we're going to talk about this one. You watch it. What did you think of it just as a movie? How was it for you? Did it do what you thought, which was make you angry?
So I'm going to be very honest. And I messaged you this on Discord when we were talking about the movie that we were watching. It didn't make me angry the way that I thought it would, but there were definitely moments where I was like, that's not how that works. That's not how that's supposed to work. That spell doesn't work that way. That doesn't. And like, you can ask my wife, I was sitting there just on my phone, just taking notes frantically of like, yes, I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, I was maybe sitting around a 6 on the that's not how that's supposed to work angry meter. But that's that I in any campaign that I'm in, I am the rules lawyer, whether I'm DMing or playing as a character.
Gotcha.
So the rules lawyer in me was definitely yelling at the screen of like, druids can't turn into owlbears no matter how hard you try.
So
But
they could. That was a thing you could do in older editions of Dungeons and Dragons. Druids could turn into owlbears.
Right.
And
So yeah.
And my other thing on that, because that was a big thing when the first trailer for this dropped, was people said druids can't turn into owlbears. And one of the things that I love about tabletop games in general, but specifically the rules of Dungeons and Dragons, my favorite part of it is that right in the DMG, it tells you do whatever you want. Like,
Oh
in
yeah,
the
it's
end,
fast and loose.
it's great. And so I viewed that as, all right, the DM for this campaign allows it. And then Baldur's Gate 3 comes out as a game and druids can turn into owlbears in that. So they were like, man, sure, why not? It's not without precedent that they can do it, but yes, it is, as the rule is written for a druid in 5th edition, you can't. But I as a DM will often play rule of cool as well. Like, if you can give me a compelling reason why it should happen, I usually will allow stuff at my table.
Yeah,
So
other than just me want to smash things as owlbear, then there needs to be a reason.
Yeah. So, that one was okay. But one of the things for me that this movie did that I loved, and I went and saw it with that group of friends that I mentioned that we play D&D a lot together. We all went to the theater, saw it opening weekend. And the thing that we all came out of it with, our feel of it, was it felt like sitting around the table playing a game. It gave that feeling of players playing a game of D&D. Did you get that sense at all from it?
On the first watch of it, which was about 2 weeks ago, I feel like I said I had my I'm not gonna like this mindset, so I was looking for things to dislike.
Okay.
But I just finished watching it like right before we ate dinner tonight, right before I logged on here. And I went into it with okay, you're already mad that it's not the D&D you want it to be, but now just accept it for the movie that it is. And I definitely get what you're saying as far as it felt like you said, a group of friends just kind of trying to not one up each other, but kind of like one of the notes that I've made is that they are taking this comic relief way too far, but thinking of it as a group of friends sitting around a table, that's kind of what you do.
Right.
You're not taking the game seriously. You're not um you may not be as hard and fast with the rules as some people are. But so yes, going based off of what you were saying, I can see that now on my second watch through of yeah, it's a group of people just wanting to have a good time.
And I like the way you phrase that, where you did watch it that first time and you kind of already had that mindset of like, this is going to upset me. And you start looking for those things. And watching it that second time, you do, because I think giving it that chance and giving it a second watch benefits a lot of times, because you, as you said, you can watch it for what the movie is instead of the D&D that you want it to be. It doesn't necessarily make it better or worse in your mind, but you at least look at it from a different perspective. And I talk about that a lot with this show and kind of my movie discourse in general. Like, you went into it having kind of a preconceived notion, and we all do that, right? We all bring our own baggage to a movie. We're a different person every time we watch a movie. And I like that, you can kind of take a step back and be like, all right, it's not what I want it to be, but I can understand where the appeal is in something like this, because it does have that feeling. I loved There's so many little things this movie does right. Even if the exact written rules in the books maybe aren't followed exactly, or the spells. And the spells, it was funny. I found a website that went through and like listed all the spells that got used, and a few
Yeah,
of them where they were like, there was a few of them where they said, well, we think it might be this spell, but it also could be this one. Like, there's a couple different spells they could be using there.
right. I either found the same website as you, or I also went on Chat GPT and just typed in, what are all the spells that were used? Were they used correctly? What level are those spells? Kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Because there's definitely a few times where things happen that wouldn't happen exactly around a table, but at the same time, when you're converting and adapting something like a tabletop game session to a narrative story like that, you don't have the ability to have the breaks to discuss what's happening. So the stuff's got to
Right.
get moving on. Like combat, for instance, I think, because they did release Wizards of the Coast released stat blocks for all the characters, the main characters in this movie
Right.
after it
I
came
have
out.
that on D&D Beyond. Yeah.
Yeah, which I thought was really, I mean, it's a smart tie-in. Hasbro is not dumb at marketing. We'll say that. Um, but I thought it was interesting because they had things like, what was it? Holga had, was it 3 actions per turn? I think is what she was supposed to have, or
Give me a
something.
second. I'm gonna try and pull them up if I can.
Okay. But it was something like that. And I like, yeah, there's probably the way that the choreography is done out. It's really difficult to get all of that timing perfect. But I think they overall did a really good job of like representing these encounters in a way that felt good, while also being interesting and entertaining to watch. Um, and that's where, for me, I'm okay with it going a little loose on the rules, because you need to have it. It's sort of like, um, and again, I'm beating the dead horse of talking about Lord of the Rings as a great adaptation, but it's like Peter Jackson and company adapting those books and saying, okay, here's the story, here's the main story that needs to be told. So what can we trim to get that to work right? So like Tom Bombadil, Peter Jackson loves Tom Bombadil, but he said does not work for our story, because you're moving along, and then we grind to a halt and talk to this weird random dude in the forest who sings a lot, and then never mention him again. Love him,
Right.
cut him out, move on, that kind of stuff. So like when you're doing this adaptation, and a game is even harder, right? Because at least a novel is a narrative thing that you can adapt. When you're doing a
Right.
game,
There's a set start, middle, and end on it.
mhm, so you have to really go for the feel and the vibe of the game, which again, I think that they did really well because you have sort of Chris Pine and uh, shoot, Michelle Rodriguez. Wow. Edgin and Holga. They're a lot of comic relief, but they're the players who are like Edgin is the player who's very casual, right? He's just sort of there to have fun and hang out, and he's playing a bard. And I love
Yeah.
the fact that Edgin's stat block that got released was a lot of the spells don't look like spells. You know what I mean? Like they don't have they're not magic in the sense of a sorcerer or a wizard. It's a lot of verbal bard spells that,
Right. Talking about for Edgin.
yeah.
Yeah, so looking at his stat block right now, at will, he has friends and message, 3 a day, charm person, disguise self, 1 a day, suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Because
So
all of
like
these
it's
are written
all
out as monster stat blocks, not character sheets.
gotcha. But those are all a lot of those are spells that don't have somatic components, and it's basically just verbal stuff. And like he can be casting those out of combat a lot, and it makes
Right.
sense for his character the way that he works. But then you have Doric, the druid. What I loved about her character, she's a little bit more serious than the rest of the party. But there's those moments where she has a little smirk, almost like that one player who does want to be more hardcore about it, but also finds whatever the hell is going on to be really funny, right? Like
To be pretty good, yeah.
something happens, it gets a little laugh out of the table, like obviously that kind of stuff, and then improvises later on and does something crazy, like tell them to jump into a gelatinous cube, you know?
Yeah.
So I loved moments like that. And boy, I'll tell you what, if you are into the lore of Dungeons and Dragons, they pulled all sorts of stuff. And
Yeah, that's a lot of like the second time that I watched through it, instead of looking for what they did wrong, I more so looked at what they did right. And like in my notes I've got the list of, like all of the locations that they went to,
mhm.
all of the magic items that got used, like we were talking about, all the spells that got cast and all of that kind of stuff. Like I've got all of that in my notes right now. I'm trying to find which tab it's on.
And that was amazing. Like the dragons that they mention, the black dragon in the one flashback, and he's spitting acid. And then we get, who's the chonky dragon? What's his name?
I literally just wrote that down today.
I've
Starts
got
with a
it somewhere.
T.
Yep. Thembershard.
Thembershard. Yeah, I was about to say, let's see who finds it first. I
Thembershard.
found it at the same time. Yeah. So on my notes, I've got him written down: a notable red dragon from the Forgotten Realms, known for being overweight and ruling over the Drugar of Grax Ilsug. I don't know how to pronounce that, in the
Yeah.
Underdark.
I mean, you pronounced it as close as I could have. So,
Yeah, I
but
even think
no,
I missed a few letters on it. But yeah, so he's known to be a very chonky boy, very known to be like the quintessential dragon hoarding things
yep.
dragon. I
And I love
didn't
that.
catch the black dragon's name.
I don't remember the name, but I know, I can't recall it offhand, but I know that it was like a named dragon at some point that was a adult black dragon. But
I
I
got
loved
you.
Thembershard as the chunky dragon. Like it's just in the movie, if you don't know D&D at all, it's just a funny gag to have a dragon that's this big fat dragon that can barely fit through the cave and like roly poly. It's fun to watch. It's silly. It's goofy. Um, but then when you realize, oh no, that's a thing pulled from the lore, like that's a real dragon that they did, like that's a fun thing to
Yeah.
do. Or um even so the movie opens, I love the opening to this movie because like first of all those shots, those location shots that some of them were probably great like landscape shots, and then they extend them and they add some CG to them.
Right.
um but we go to the prison where Edgin and Holga are being held, and I love that Edgin keeps talking about Jarnathan, and we get his sort of their parole hearing, and he's like, "Yeah, Jarnathan, Chancellor Jarnathan's going to be there, and he's Aarakocra, and that I think that's going to be really helpful for us getting released," type of thing. And if you
Right.
know the lore, Aarakocra number one, they're bird people.
Right. I knew that based off of. I didn't think Jonathan himself was a lore based character, but yeah, the Aarakocra species goes back far
Mhm.
enough into the lore.
But what's fun about that is there's layers to it too, because he's not just a bird person type creature, but they are very they're about freedom and they don't like imprisonment type stuff. So
Right.
you can think about that, and the way he's framing it all, even if you don't know, it just makes it seem like, oh, he might have some sort of connection with Jonathan. And then the reveal of why that matters is so much better.
He just wanted to use him because he could fly.
Just exactly. It's such a great gag, and just the build up for it, because as Chris Pine, by the way, perfect casting as your bard, because that dude, ever since I saw him in Smokin' Aces back in 2006, I saw Chris Pine in that. That was the first thing I saw him in. He played a character named Darwin, and he's got only a few scenes because that movie's a huge ensemble cast. But he's got this one scene, and I just thought that guy's going to have a good career. There was something
Yeah.
about just his presence on screen, and he's so good in that opening bit, telling his backstory and weaving in like, but Jonathan would really like this. Like all that kind of stuff was just so well timed and well done. And I
Yeah,
think you
I
need.
know. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I know him. You said your first thing was Smoking Aces.
Mhm.
I feel like the first thing I remember seeing him in were all the readaptations of Star Trek,
Yep.
which is another thing I am a huge fan of. That's lore that I also know pretty deeply in my mind.
Mhm.
And it's that same thing of like you have to be a charismatic person to pull off Kirk.
Oh,
Like you
absolutely.
have to you have to be able to talk your way out of things. You have to be able to, oh, this thing's about to beat me up. Let me run the other way, but also like make it seem like it's a nobler thing to run away than to actually fight.
Yep.
So it's yeah, the bard, him as a bard is yeah, I can, and with the stat block and everything that I've seen over here, like you said, it's friendship, it's charming, it's using charisma as your modifier to get
Yep.
your point across.
Yeah, and you can even see there's moments in the movie where watching it again, I'm like, oh, okay, that's sort of his bardic inspiration, right? He's given them a little boost.
Right. Which is one thing
Um,
I noticed as well. He didn't, of all of the three spellcasters in the movie, because you've got your druid, your sorcerer, your paladin, and your bard. So I guess technically four. He's the only one that didn't actually cast a noticeable spell.
yeah,
But like
yep,
you were saying, it's the bardic inspiration. It's the pick your team up when you're down. It's the give the encouraging speech before the big thing happens.
yep. Or even something as simple as when Holga comes out and she's all upset and gets on her horse from spending time with her ex, and he starts singing a
Right.
song for her, like just that little boost to bring her morale back up. I just love stuff like that.
Right.
And I do think too, this is a 2 hour and 14-minute movie, which is a long time to spend in a movie in general.
Right. It really didn't feel like it though.
It doesn't, because it's paced well. And the first 15 minutes are getting to know Edgin and Holga and their backstory and what brought them to this point. And I think that is important. And I actually wrote that down, where we need that first 15 minutes to gain an emotional connection to Edgin and Holga. Because if we don't have that, everything that happens over the next 2 hours is just kind of, it's fine. But it doesn't carry any weight to it. Because I remember the 2000 Dungeons and Dragons film, the one that has Jeremy Irons chewing scenery like it's going out of style. If you've ever seen that movie, look up overacting in a dictionary, and it's just clips of Jeremy
It's
Irons
just
in
that.
Dungeons and Dragons.
I have not seen it. I knew that the animated series existed. I don't think I actually knew that a earlier film adaptation existed.
Yeah, it's rough at times, but at the same time, there's a camp factor to it that's so much fun. So there is some good things about it, but that movie does jump right into the story. And so you don't have that connection. And that is important when you feel something for a character in order for things that happen later on to matter. And what happens with Holga, especially towards the
Right.
end of the movie, for me, carried a lot more weight and hit a lot harder because we spent that first 15 minutes getting to know them. And like, you got Edgin, who's just talking, and she's sitting over there just munching on a potato the whole time. Like, it's so silly, but I loved it.
Which is the barbarian thing to do. Like, I'm not going to talk my
Absolutely.
way out of this. I'm waiting for a fight to break out.
Yeah. Yep. And then we meet Forge, who's Hugh Grant, and I love this era of Hugh Grant. This older this older version of Hugh Grant that doesn't take himself too seriously, so he can have a lot of fun with some of these movies. He is having a blast playing this character because he
Oh yeah,
just
he
gets to
was he
be.
was he was eating that like snide like con man
Mhm, mhm.
like more so of the charmer even than the bard, I would say, which
Yeah.
is what the rogue is meant to do.
Yep. It's perfect, right? And you need somebody with that level of charisma to play this type of a character. Because if you've got a bard, if you've got Chris Pine as your lead, you've got a lot of charisma there. You need somebody with that level or more to be able to counterbalance. And Hugh Grant does it so perfectly.
Right, counterbalance or at least match it at some
Mhm.
points.
Yeah. And he just like you just want to punch him in the face all of the time. Like every time you see him, you're just like, I hate you so much. And he's perfect at it. Um, and I'll tell you what, right now, he can get scary too. If you haven't seen Heretic yet, which came out just last year, that movie
Nah.
is incredible and he is amazing in it. But in this, I had a ton of fun with him because the other thing I loved is he's the rogue, right? And most people want to go after money and power. His whole thing was just money. At the end of
Right.
the day, he didn't care about having any power. He just wanted all the money. That was his whole motivation.
Right,
And I kind
because
of like
at
that.
the end he essentially just handed over the power anyway,
Yeah.
and was just like, "Cool, I've got my boat with all my treasure on it. I'm good to go. I don't
Mhm.
care what happens to this city."
Nope. Which arguably is worse in some ways
Yeah.
because just the apathy of like, I don't care what happens to all these people. He knows it's going to be something terrible because he knows the Red Wizards are not good. Um,
Right.
and we even get stuff in this movie that made it again feel like sitting around the table with your friends, like Zenk, the paladin, because he
Right.
is the DM bringing in an NPC to help the party get where they got to go, right? And so
Right.
I love it because he's played as this incredibly stoic character, basically has zero personality of his own, is just perfect.
He is the most paladinic paladin that's ever paladin on Paladin Day. It's
Exactly.
to almost to the point that I was annoyed the first time I watched it. And
Yes.
I was like, what? Why? I was like, why is this a character? Why is he here? He's not
Hmm.
doing anything other than just. But the thing is, though, I played an Oathbreaker paladin in
Okay.
one of the small campaigns that I played,
Hmm.
and I kind of not necessarily played it the opposite of how he was in the movie, but I pretty much played it to the letter on the fact of like I would let everybody talk. I would listen to everybody's stuff around the table, and I was like, okay, cool. Here's why your idea is stupid, but here's why we're still gonna do it.
Yeah.
And I
And
feel like he was almost the opposite side of that coin on the fact of I'm going to tell you all of the information up front and let you decide what you're gonna do with it.
yeah, because he's literally the DM playing this character, and so there's no thought put into like flourish or any defining characteristics. It's just paladin. You know, I've got the stat block written out. He does this. He does even to the point of, and it killed me the first time I watched it when Zenk leaves. It's like the DM
There he
saying,
goes,
and Zenk
just
just
walking
walks
in it,
away,
just walking in a
and
straight line.
it's so perfect. It's
Like
so
that's
good.
even
But
the
he's
line
like,
that he says. He's like he walks such a perfectly straight line. Is he gonna
Mhm.
keep? There's a rock. Nope. Now he's stepping over it.
Yep. Oh, I loved it. And I love just those moments of interaction, right? Because you've got so much personality from everyone else, and then he's there, and to the point where he doesn't get colloquialisms, he doesn't understand idioms and all of that kind of stuff, because the person playing that character, the DM, just doesn't care. He's like, yeah, whatever, that's fine. Just do this. He's just there to help the party get where they got to go, and then he's done and he leaves. And so like that was the kind of stuff that felt so real to me. Or like when they're in the Underdark and they get to that bridge. Here was the thing that was brilliant about that is they come up to the bridge, and so the joke as soon
Yeah,
as the scene
that's
starts.
that's one thing I wrote in my notes is on the fact of like it's the joke that you saw in the trailer,
Mhm.
so you know the payout. But yeah, but keep going with your
Well,
explanation.
the joke, it's coming, so it's the anticipation of how they're going to do that, and they set it up so perfectly because he starts to give the description of what they've got to do, and it's the overly elaborate, you know,
Yeah,
move forward but only on odd bricks, and then left or right doesn't matter, and at the middle of the bridge, all that kind of stuff. The music flips; it gets this almost felt a little bit like the soundtrack to Tron Legacy at times, like right there. It kind of gives that same feel, and then you're watching it and you're just waiting for, yeah, but somebody's going to do something stupid and collapse the bridge. And that is the DM setting up the elaborate thing, and just the party is the cats playing with the cardboard box. They don't care. They
right.
don't do the thing. And then they get the hither tither or hither thither staff
Hither,
to get
yeah, hither
themselves
to
out
their
of it,
staff.
the situation. So I
Right.
just love all of that. Like it just felt like playing a game. Um,
And that's kind of that whole thing of like you said, if we're looking at this as a campaign and we're looking at it's the DM setting these stages up, it's on the fact of like, well, the DM handed them the thing they needed. They just didn't know they had it.
yep.
So that hither thither staff, it was just like, oh yeah, that's just some walking stick that we've had for years. It's like, but it takes the one person to roll. Like you're just sitting there rolling Arcana checks over and over and over again until you
Yes.
hit a high enough DC, and you're like, oh no, wait, I know exactly what this is.
Yep, exactly.
Like
It's
let's all just go in a circle and roll our dice, and nobody knows that this big like the MacGuffin that we gave you 5 campaigns ago is the
mhm.
one thing that you need now.
And that can only be written by people who have played around a table. Like you can't just accident into that kind of thing. Like that comes from a place of knowing or having been around sitting around a table doing that. Like you or I with enough uh we have enough kind of experience gaming to know this is the interactions that you have with people, and you can
Right.
weave that into your story. Um,
So did
so
John
I do.
Francis Daley write the movie as well as direct, or
So it was co-directed, and they did. The directors did co-write it. So the story was written. They had a script, and then they tweaked it, punched it up. Did some more stuff to it. But they did
I
help
got you.
help to write it,
I got
and
you. Yeah, I can see
and
it.
that
I
show,
see it right here now. It's yeah.
and it comes through in the final product. I think when somebody really understands the material they're working with. It's like watching, comic book movies and how they evolved as films. When you went from like that's kind of novel to people that really read comics, grew up with them, understand that type of storytelling, weaving that into a movie, or uh, Lord of Peter Jackson doing Lord of the Rings because he grew up loving it and wanted to adapt that, versus uh, say the Super Mario Brothers movie from the early '90s, where the directors didn't know anything about that game and they had no tie to it. Granted, that's also like a terrible time to make a video game movie because there is no story to adapt. Like the story is so paper thin. Um, but you know what I mean? Like it makes a difference when you've got a history with something you can write from a place of kind of knowledge. And I do think we had that here. I think that John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein really understood that. Um, Now, we talked a little bit before we got started about visuals. I love the visuals of this movie overall. I think that the feel of it, the look of the Sword Coast and everything that they were doing, I thought really worked for me. What did you think kind of the overall look of things?
So the overall look of things, and like you said, we talked about it a little bit before. It is definitely the the need, especially for stuff like if you're casting spells, or you've got a flying bird creature, or you've got these species of creatures that don't exist in the real world. So like you saw Dragonborn, you saw Tabaxi, there
Mhm.
was one Githyanki in there somewhere. It's like some of that can be done with practical effects and some of it can't. So it's finding that good balance of where a lot of stuff went in. There was definitely some scenery that you could tell was practical, but
Yep.
then there was some, like obviously the giant arena, like where
Oh
the
yeah.
High Sun Games was held, and all the like rising and falling maze walls and everything.
Mhm.
That obviously is something that is going to look out of place. Or you could tell with Hugh Grant being on top of one of the walls, the angle that they're looking up, you could tell it was probably just green screen above him, and they CGI'd
Sure.
all that in.
Mhm.
So I liked the look of it. It definitely felt like you said, you were in Faerun, you were on the Sword Coast, you were in all of these places. Um, but yeah, there were definitely some points where I was like, it it's too grand to not be computer generated,
Oh, for sure. For sure.
but not
And
in a bad
fantasy.
way.
Right. I mean, a fantasy film is going to have that because you're not in reality, so there's going to be some of that difference. Now, what's cool is the Dragonborn that we see, especially in the parole scene, the Aarakocra, the Tabaxi. Those were practical effects. Those were suits that people were wearing. That maybe
Okay,
had some digital manipulation to them, but like the guy wearing they had, they talked to somebody about that. The guy wearing the Jarnathan costume, for instance, had wings, like a 13-foot wingspan, and he was wearing stilts to make
right.
him. He was like
So
8 feet tall in that thing. His eyes were
right.
looking out like the neck. Um,
So when they use him and break out, and when they're fighting with him and actually struggling, and then when they land in the snow, all of
mhm,
that you could definitely tell was real by the way the wings were reacting to them moving it, or by the way he was like stumbling back, like you said, on I guess stilts, if he
yeah.
was needing to be 6 to 8 feet tall. But then specifically when he's laying on his back on the snow and Hulga leans over and she's like, okay, don't worry, he's alive, he's still breathing. You could
Mhm,
tell that that beak that was on his face was a full mask. Like you can,
yeah.
it fit into the scenery. It didn't just look like they pasted that over and she was probably looking at a dude in a green morph suit. It
Right.
it fit in the environment. I didn't know the
Which,
tabaxis were real though.
yeah, in fact, they made a little animatronic Tabaxi baby, and it was a wireless puppet, and
Huh.
they had to fit it inside the fish mouth in a way that the mouth could close without crushing it, so that they could
Okay.
open the mouth and have Zenk reach in and pull the little baby out. So like they did a great job of mixing practical and digital effects together to give the world more immersion. Because
Right.
moments like Jarnathan laying on his back and Holga looking at him is going to look out of place if it's just a full CG character without anything
Right.
there in front of her. And I think that just it lends so much more uh, of a tactile feel to things when you can. It's the way that digital effects work best, right? You shouldn't notice them, or if you do notice, like you said, obviously some of the vistas or some of the locations are going to be digital. It should just be like you shouldn't notice that it's generated so much as it's just doesn't look like anything we've ever seen before, type of
Right.
thing.
So
Um,
you mentioned was the fish itself real? Because you said the jaw had to open up and not
yeah, that was the
crush.
thing. Yeah, that was the thing that they
Okay.
made.
because that was another thing where looking at it compared to, because the angle that they had it at, it was like the sea, and then they would flip around and it was the big city. It's like you
Mhm.
could tell that everything in the background was probably not all practical,
Yeah.
but it was those tiny things, like you said, just slightly enhanced with computer. But I was like, that looks like a full on like Muppet style fish.
Yeah.
Like that
Oh yeah.
that didn't stick out as something that looked weird to me, especially the second time watching it, where I was like, okay, like I said, where I could take it in as a movie being a movie.
Mhm.
I was able to look at those little things and I was like, that fish looks way too real for them to have just had something with, like, I guess, like you said, a puppet inside of it.
Yeah.
So that's cool
And
to
it's
know that.
just it's where I love where we've gotten to with effects today, in that there is a lot more of this kind of thing going on, where there's something there, and then they take it and they enhance it, or they mesh it together with a background. Like, you make a set, and you might only make your set 10, 15, 20 feet tall necessarily, but then
Right.
you extend that, right? So you take the back part of it and you extend it. When I did Prometheus for this show a little while back, and that was one of the things. Ridley Scott wanted to build as much of the sets as they could and then extend them to
Right.
add the backgrounds to it, because the more that the actors have in front of them to work with, the better performances you're going to get, and then you can kind of make things look a little bit better. So I loved all of that. I just think that was great. Plus, I loved, even if the spells weren't exactly as they were written in the rules, I love the look of them in this. Like, the look of the magic was really cool when they would be throwing
Right.
fire bolts or chaos bolts or whatever it was, or making things morph and change. Um, all the stuff, like the mage fight with Simon and Sofina was awesome, where they're fighting with Bigby's hands.
Right.
That was
Yeah, and
cool because it wasn't.
it was cool. It was flavored to their characters.
Mhm.
So it wasn't just a magical hand that was showing up that looked the same going at each other. It was like the evil, like demonic pointed fingers, ripped off skin
Yeah.
hand of Safina, and then Simon was just using the materials around him. Like, it
Yep.
was the cobblestone in the ground
I
that would
love
just
that.
wave up and then basically just arm wrestle and body slam the other, like, massive hand coming at it. So yeah,
Also, it's
the
just,
spells and all of that were very well produced.
yeah, and it's just cool to see two magic users fight, and it's not just beams of different colored energy going at each other.
I
Like,
did that's it's funny enough, like, I keep referencing back on my notes. I was like, it feels very, or and not, it feels different from just, Avada Kedavra versus Expelliarmus, and they just meet
right,
in the
exactly.
middle, and it's who's stronger willed back and forth.
Hmm.
It definitely did feel like, or like a lightsaber fight. It definitely felt, I guess it felt more like a lightsaber fight, on the fact that things were constantly changing and moving, and there was
Yeah,
choreography to the fight, versus, like I said, just two people standing on opposite sides of a room shooting
yeah,
lasers at each other. It
exactly.
moved and it felt more, I guess, also, like, you like keep referring back to a real campaign, on the fact of, like, knowing where your player is standing in reference to the NPCs that are on the board.
Hmm.
It's like, I have to know how far my range on this spell is. I have to know what I can and can't do in terms of. I guess they kind of played more fast and loose with the, like, set number of spell slots, how many
Hmm.
spells you can cast per whatever. It, but that's something that you can't really just, all right, everyone take your turn now. Doric, now you get
Exactly.
a turn. Now you attack now, because it's what I always tell my players, is that all of this combat is happening at the same time.
Yeah.
A turn is 6 seconds of your stuff, and then it moves on to the next person, but their 6 seconds are happening at the same time your 6 seconds happened.
Hmm.
So it technically, if you were to watch this battle play out, it's chaotic and it's moving. So it's
Yeah.
like, we're taking 2 minutes to make a 30-second fight. And that played out very well in especially that final scene, that final fight against Safina. I don't think it played out so much in kind of the other fights. Like when, how do you pronounce his name? The Paladin,
Zenk.
Zenith. Like when he was fighting the guys in the Underdark, or when Holga was fighting the guards when they escaped the city the second time. Those definitely just felt more like I'm going to just do all of this stuff and nothing's really happening back to me. But I brought up something that you seem to have a opinion on.
No, I was just going to say the Zenk one, I agree with you. It does have that feel. But given that in my head, Zenk is the DM's character, I feel like that's more of, that's less of a encounter that the party is a part of and more of just the DM is like explaining that these two fought each other, or, you know, his guys came and Zenk takes them out type of deal.
Right.
Holga's, yes, to an extent, although I think they did try, as I mentioned, she's got something like 3 actions per turn. I think they tried to give that rhythm of like her getting X number of movements in before she has to go on reactive. But, you know, it's getting that perfect again is not going to happen. So yeah, it does give a little bit more or a little bit less of the D&D feel in those scenes. But the first one, when they're first escaping the city, does have that feel because she's move, react, move. And then meanwhile, you got Edgin over there just failing his role to cut his ropes like 4 times in a row.
Right.
It's so good. But he finally gets it off, and so he's able to do one thing right at the end.
Right.
It killed me. It just and this movie also has a moment that it doesn't matter how many times I watch it, I will laugh out loud. And it is Edgin distracting the guards as they come into Neverwinter, where he's playing the lute and they're doing the major
minor
illusion.
image, what I guess it would be major image. Yeah, minor illusion, it wouldn't be able to have as much, but yeah, that it was funny. Like I said, the first time I watched it, I was like, that's not 100% how that spell would work. Like breaking concentration doesn't mean the spell kind of starts to fail and fall apart. But then, yeah, the second time I was like, oh, okay, that's got some comedy to it.
It's the way that, first of all, when he comes up initially and he does his little like jump heel kick as he's playing, it's just so floofy and so fun and it's just goofy. But
and
then
you can definitely tell that, like, because it's Simon casting the spell, that's how Simon sees Edgin.
Yes.
Like which is definitely like the player of like the player mindset of just like, why do you play this like massively like flamboyantly pompous version of whatever? It's like it's definitely like the player mocking someone else for how they do their thing.
Yep, exactly that. And then for the concentration to do what it did isn't exactly how you would think of it, but at the same time, I can kind of see that playing out. And it is just when he starts to stutter like a record playing over and over, and then just melts. It is the funniest and most nightmare-inducing thing you'll ever see. Like it's just so good.
Yeah, there were definitely things like that where, like I said, I'm very rules lawyer when it comes to the game, but there were moments in the movie where I was like, okay, if I were to tweak this a little bit, it definitely gave me some ideas as far as like a next campaign on maybe that is how concentration works, or like when Simon is having to attune to the helmet. It's like you think of attunement as just, oh, I'm going to take a short rest, I'm going to focus on this thing, and now it's mine, and now I can use it. I think the internal struggle of how is this item going to be used, or how am I going to combat, maybe even like you could almost work it as if a previous person owned the item, how are you going to fight their attunement off of it before you can use it yourself?
Yeah.
So definitely there were some things in it where I was like, that's not 100% how the rules work, but I like the way they did it. to make it fit a bigger movie style.
Yeah. Yeah, to fit a nice narrative, and it gives Simon as a character an arc and something to do, because his big thing is, the confidence in himself, which is played both
Which
for
I think
laughs,
then
but also
also Yeah, which I think then also allows him to pull off the final big move. Like
Mhm.
he's got the confidence enough now of knowing, okay, when we fight the big bad, I can do the thing that they're telling me to do
Yep.
without messing it up.
Yeah.
Because he gets his big hero moment on the fact of like, okay, we're gonna convince Safina that she's beaten us, but really we're all just biding time to get the final that we need.
Yeah. And it's the perfect use of the trope, right? That's the trope of the group knows something that the audience doesn't. It's every heist movie ever, where
Right.
the guys, the crew doing the heist somehow magically know exactly how everything's going to play out, so it works in their favor. And it's done here, and it's done here so well, because they earned that by giving us Simon's growth, by giving us moments with Edgin, inspiring everybody, and kind of winning back his daughter's trust and favor a little bit, because his story is heartbreaking. Um, and that scene where he's pouring his heart out to who he thinks is his daughter, only to find out that it's Sofina.
Oh yeah.
Um, oh, the line that gets me, I captured it because it was just too good not to, is
And I wasn't trying to bring your mom back. I was trying to bring my wife back.
his admission of that is so much in that moment. And then of course, it's not even to his actual daughter, but
Right.
like it's the fact that he's finally coming out and saying that out loud, that was his motivation all along, again makes what he does at the end of the movie hit that much harder.
Right. Which I I don't know if I thought it or if they actually said it out loud on the fact of um the daughter, what's her name?
Kira.
I wrote everything down, but I just anyway, the daughter, either she says it or I thought it at some point on the fact of like she was maybe 2 years old when all of this went down, so she
Mhm.
doesn't know her mother the way Edgin did,
Right.
but her mother is the woman that grew up with her and like took care of her and everything.
Yeah.
So at the end, it becomes the fact of Edgin realizes that like he doesn't need his wife back, but he does need to bring someone everybody cares about. Like it is the most unselfish thing that he could do out of after an entire life of nothing but I'm going to look out for myself.
Yeah.
It is the most lawful good thing of somebody that's definitely a chaotic neutral player.
Oh, absolutely. Because he, in the opening scene, when he is recounting what brought him to, get imprisoned and all of that, one of the things he says is like the worst thing that he did was deprive his daughter of her father for 2 years, right? And
By
and
being
I
locked
think,
up. Yeah.
yeah, and he even says,
I'll spend the rest of my days trying to right that wrong. Anything you want to add?
I'm good.
but
She's just sitting over there eating her potato.
yep, but like, so we need that, because then later on he gives the admission of like, yeah, but I've also been doing all of this, and I did all of this for selfish reasons in as well, until he sort of has that realization like, all right, I really want to do this for you. It's such a good arc for his character, and I really enjoyed that because it made me care. It made me care about him, made me care about Holga. They have a great chemistry, because there's a little bit of the trope of like, um you know the best friend girl and guy, and but there's no will they won't they between the two of them, because there isn't like a real romantic connection there, but they
Right.
have some of those tropes
I
of
never felt at any moment like even at the point of like they're about to form this final plan, and Holga's the one that has the big idea,
Mhm.
and Edgin's line is like, "Holga, I could kiss you," and she's like, "Yeah, try it."
Yeah.
like like not even in a why don't you go ahead and try it, like do it and I will murder you right now.
Yes, exactly.
Whereas
No,
your actual romantic arc, I guess, is Simon and Doric on
Mhm.
the fact, but it's like it's not even the romantic arc that it needs to be. It's basically Simon, like I said, just sitting there like every 5 minutes in the campaign. I'm just like, I'm gonna try that charisma check one more time. I'm gonna,
Yeah.
and then finally, just at one point, you hit the nat 20 or you hit the DC 16 that it needs to be,
Mhm.
and it's like if I just keep rolling this dice enough, it'll finally pay off.
Law of averages states I have to eventually meet that. Like, I can't fail forever. Yeah, I
Right.
loved that. And there's so many little moments in this that are super fun. Like there's the moment of Simon and uh the other wizard with their standoff, like it's a western. Very brief, but they're facing off, and then like a basket rolls between them like a tumbleweed. It cracked me up watching it this
Was
time.
that
I
during
never
the
did that.
final? Was that during the
That
final
was in the
Sophia
final.
battle?
Yeah, with Sofina.
Okay,
That's what it was.
I guess I didn't. I guess I didn't notice that part that the
It
tumbleweed.
it's very quick. It doesn't they don't linger on it for very long, but a basket rolls in
Right.
between them like a tumbleweed. It's just like that cracked me up. There's all these little moments of stuff like that.
I
It's
got you.
kind of peppered throughout. I did capture a few more uh, bits of audio that are worth listening to.
Yeah.
Zenk, for instance.
I do not traffic in colloquialisms.
I just
Which is, like I said, the
monotone.
most paladin thing you could possibly say.
Mhm. And like he says everything so monotone. So then when he says,
What will become of the wealth you burgle?
What does that matter?
I will not be complicit in the illicit use of ill-gotten booty.
it's so good.
I will not be
It's just,
complicit in the illicit.
mm. I wonder how many takes that took, because it would have. I don't think I could have nailed that on the first one.
Oh, just tongue twister wise, yeah.
Yeah, just tongue twister wise. Uh, Again, Hugh Grant as Forge. I mean, when we meet him again for the first time, when they go to see him, and he's going up, he's giving him hugs, and when he looks at Holga,
I know you don't like hugs, but I need one. Yes,
and it was the I need one, and then just that little
yes.
yes, just got me.
And then he does that like a few more times as he's hugging her. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
he's just
Yeah.
like making these like weird, awkward noises as he's hugging her. And she's clearly just, it's that whole thing of like, I could kiss you. Yeah, good luck trying. Like,
Yeah.
if you weren't currently the person that we needed you to be, you wouldn't be alive anymore.
Yes. I also like when Sofina walks into the room when they're sitting with him, and she walks in, and just this exchange.
You're still working with her?
She's the one that got us caught.
Not true, no. Without her, we all would have been caught.
No, without her, you wouldn't have gone to that place in the first place
Right.
and gotten
Exactly.
caught.
Right. Because the whole
Forge.
premise of the movie and what you hear in the trailer is we stole the wrong thing for the wrong person. So you would have never been in this situation if you had never partnered with the Red Wizards in the first place.
Exactly. But I also love, like, he's got some self-awareness.
Well, hang on, I'm a god and a lord. I am really doing all right.
And this is very true.
Never put your trust in a con man.
Don't put your trust in a con man.
Right.
You should know this by now. Holga too, like Michelle Rodriguez, Holga as the barbarian. The character is written to have like a low intelligence, low wisdom scores. And I kind of like that. I don't remember what the stat block was, but like the way that she's portrayed, she's not stupid, but she's not like
Right.
she just like she's a barbarian, right? Just fix it with magic. Just do it with magic.
Yeah.
Pay it with magic. Like I love that whole bit.
Her intelligence modifier is a 0. Her wisdom modifier is a 3.
Okay.
But she's got plus 4 in intimidation.
Yeah. Well, that would work. She also has a type. She very much has a type of men that she likes, which is small.
Which is very small men.
That
Because
okay.
I didn't notice it the first time, but I definitely noticed it the second time watching when the halfling is like giving them the medals and like pinning
Yes.
everything on them. She gives them kind of like a small like
She
like
gives them the look, like
what
a
are
little,
what, of just like a
bites
what
the
are
lip
you
a little
doing
bit. Yeah.
later kind of thing.
Yeah. Which again is great because we had that big emotional moment with Edgin bringing her back and the whole, why did you waste that on me? But it doesn't then continue on to the trope of they get together to raise Kira. She
Right.
is her own person. They're co-parenting Kira, but they're
Exactly.
romantically they're going to be involved with whomever. Um, when I saw this in the theater, I had no idea of the scene where she goes to see her ex and it being Bradley Cooper. I had no clue that was coming at all. Um, and that was a scene that toes the line of Uncanny Valley because that's obviously there's a lot of digital work done for a scene like that. It's
Right.
really hard to, and there's moments where you can see there's compositing going on, but there's also some really good interaction. Like when his new wife or girlfriend or whatever walks in the room, who's basically just Holga,
I,
but like the
right. I
bizarro
would almost
version of
say that
Holga.
she was a Goliath. I think if you were to classify her, I think it was Halfling and Goliath. Like Holga is clearly just human, but she towered over Holga.
Yeah, but like when she walks in and she interacts with him in the chair, she leans down, like kisses him on the head. And if you watch it again, pay attention to things like the shadows on the chair, and you realize that they had a scale chair for him to sit in and one for her to be near,
Oh, okay.
because the shadows line up really, really well. Like it's pretty impressive digital work in that scene. Yeah, there's moments just because we know who Bradley Cooper is, and so we know what he looks like in relation to somebody like Michelle Rodriguez. It's really hard to force that perspective and trick
Right.
you, but I think they did a really good job with it um, in that scene. And plus, it was just a fun cameo, although not the most fun cameo of the movie. You know what that was? It was a blink and you'll
Uh
miss it cameo, by the way.
oh, then I may have missed it.
You may have missed it. It's right towards the end, and it's a member of the crowd in the arena. There's a shot
Okay.
when they notice as they're leaving on the boat, and they realize that the death spell is happening, and so they turn the boat around. When they're
Right.
going back, there's a quick shot that flashes to just a few people in the crowd looking up, and the guy in the middle of the frame is Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine.
Is it really?
Yes, because he is a huge
Okay.
D&D player. He's a big D&D head, and
Oh, I see it now. Yeah, Tom Morello. Uh
and I love that. Like just little things like that always get me when you get somebody who's well known but not like for that thing to do it. Um,
he actually has a credited name
yeah,
in the movie. Uh Camanthe Stormhollow.
which is his dwarven character that he's been playing for years.
Is it
Is
really?
is
Like that
that's his character's name, and so that's what they
that's
credit him. That's the character they credit him as in the movie.
that's really good. Because I one
Yeah.
of my notes that I even took while I was looking through the IMDb page is that there are a lot of named people
Hmm.
character wise in this movie. Like you
There's
don't
a
get just, person in background or,
mhm.
you know, whatever. Like there's even if it's one name, like they are named people, and a lot of it are the zombies as well.
Yeah.
Because they go through and there's Sven and Vin. Uh there's one that's just called the Yes Corpse, I guess. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's just a lot of like actual named characters, but it's cool to know that that was a nod to Tom Morello actually playing D&D. That's cool.
Hmm. Also, the the thing in the graveyard with all of the ancestors and Speak with Dead is such a well-written comedy bit playing out. And you can tell that there was like Monty Python inspiration for that, to the point where they
Right.
initially wanted to have the Monty Python guys do the voices for
Oh,
those
really?
characters, but they just couldn't make it work. So
Yeah.
they actually got, and I think it's in this version, I know in Australia, but it's some of them are from Auntie Donna.
Auntie Donna's Big Old House of Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's such a great joke for both as the characters. Like there's the moment where Doric and Simon are talking, where she says,
Why 5 questions?
I don't know, that's just how it works.
Seems arbitrary.
Can we get on with this, please?
that feels like Doric is the player character who's somewhat new to D&D, and so asking that kind of question, and you got the sorcerer's like, it's just the way it's written, I don't know.
Right.
I just love that.
It's like, why do some magic items have 5 charges? Some have 3, some have 2, but it's only every other day that you can use both of them. It's like, there's no rhyme or reason to how magic items work. So to just be able to say it's 5 questions, sure, why not? Why wouldn't it be 5 questions?
Yep. And then for the questions too, like, wait, so was that a question? Yes. No, not you. Like, only answer when I'm talking to you. Do you understand? Yes. Falls back.
Yes. Why would you say okay at the end of that? I will say the first time that I watched it through, and I had somewhat of a back and forth argument with my wife in the car today on the fact of, I was like, that scene, you said it was well timed, and I agree, but I do think it went on for probably 3 minutes too long. But it's kind of a trope of, there's always the rule of 3. Like, you always just, if you play something high enough, it's going to get old. But like you said, it had that Monty Python feel to it. And I'm going to, funny enough, mention, now that you mentioned Monty Python, when I listened to your episode on the Holy Grail, it's that situation of, it gets to the point where it's not funny, and then they do it one more time, and you're like, okay, yeah, I get it. But I like I said, the first time I watched through it, where I was in my mindset of, I'm not going to enjoy this, it definitely, that scene almost lost me entirely. Like, on the fact of, I was like, if they talk to one more zombie and do not get the information that they need, I'm not watching this movie anymore. but then now going back and watching it that second time, it's like, okay, they didn't draw it out as long as I felt like it did. But I was already at my wit's end by the time they reached that scene. So, because she even told me, she was like, she was like, they didn't ask every zombie 5 questions. I was like, they 100% asked 25 questions in that scene. And she was like, they asked 2 zombies 4 questions. I was like, you're wrong. But she was right.
I also love, again, the chemistry between Michelle Rodriguez and Chris Pine, right? Like, when Zank gets brought up, and they're like, well, we got to go find him. And of course, he doesn't want to have anything to do with it because he's staying. And, and she says,
if Zank turns out to be a prick, I'll split him right down the middle.
That's very sweet.
That's very sweet. That ties that together perfectly. Like, it's just so well done. Also, I loved,
as a mouse or a
deer.
Yes, a deer. They'll blend in with all the other deer in the castle.
Don't mock me.
Again, it's that last bit. Like, that's so sweet is a perfect bard reaction. Don't mock me is what the barbarian's going to say.
It's the perfect barbarian reaction. And then that is, again, one of those things of, like, rule of 3, on the fact of, they keep bringing up, she needs to be a deer. She needs to turn into a deer. She needs to turn into a deer. It's like, all right, enough with that. And then she becomes a deer for all of, like, 5 seconds. And she's like, told you it was a good idea. It's like, which goes back to the paladin that I played, the Oathbreaker paladin, on the fact of, like, let me tell you why your idea is stupid, but why we're still going to do that plan.
Yes.
So it's
Yep.
like the idea of like, oh yeah, she'll blend in with every other deer in the castle, and then her turning into a deer is almost the one thing that saved her life, and
Right.
it didn't matter. Like, it did not matter that she turned into a deer. She could have been any other four-legged animal, but she wouldn't have had the agility to get out of that situation.
Mm-hmm. It's just
So
well done. And
it's the best laid plans are often the ones that you don't want them to be.
right. And speaking of the deer in that scene, yes, there's a lot of changing going on that wild shape shouldn't allow for based on the
Right.
rules. Maybe you can mix in polymorph into there or something, or have some sort of a rule that changing from one animal to another doesn't count as a use of wild shape, in which case she maybe gets away with it because she only changes back to her human or tiefling form twice in that entire chase,
Right, because she goes
which would
from a fly to a mouse, then she goes in the suit of armor, turns back into herself, then back into a mouse, and then it progresses into like the bird, the deer, and all of that kind of stuff.
yep. um but it's so well, that scene is so well executed from a visual standpoint because it's done as a one take. Obviously it's not a single a true one take because there's a lot of digital stuff going on. um
Right.
but I love the framing of it as a one take because I love a good continuous shot, and it keeps the pacing and the kinetic frenetic nature going of, you know, from the moment she gets noticed until she gets out the gate, it is action moving, keeping you paying attention to it all, and choosing when to like pan the camera off and sort of hide an effect by having it just be in a shadow of her morphing from one form to another, to save you a little bit while also being able to get, you know, reactions from the random people in the house where she just showed up as a cat, like
Right.
falling through their chimney type of thing. um, all of that I just really loved. I absolutely loved the shot where the mouse goes into the suit of armor and then she becomes, you know, humanoid form in the suit of armor walking away,
Right.
because that's practical. Like there's a suit of armor thing going on, but then there
Right.
has to be a moment where it switches to something digital when they knock the head off of it. And it's so well done, you don't really even notice it. Like it's just that whole sequence was really, really well done. But I can understand from a rules lawyer aspect of
Right.
that being a bit tough to watch, which is why that was one
Right.
of
On
those where I
the
had to be like, all right, the DM has decided that this
Yeah.
druid can change from animal to animal and it doesn't affect anything. It's
Right.
changing
So
from,
suspend your disbelief for the
yeah,
smallest amount for a very cool play out.
because it is a very cool play out. Like,
Right. Which is kind of the same mindset that I had as far as during the High Sun games. The way that they used the displacer beast, I thought
mhm,
was very interesting. Because in my brain, reading how a displacer beast works, in my brain, it's just like, okay, you think it's here, but it's actually, like 2 inches this way, so you miss it. But to
right,
have it be completely coming from a different side and like basically flanking your party on its own,
yeah,
and the fact of I didn't notice it the first time because once again I was angry at how they were using displacer beasts, but the fact that if you notice its tail was actually projecting the other image of itself, like
yep,
the two tails had a glow to them and you could see a small vapor trail leading off to the other displacer beast that they were trying to fight.
yep,
and
yeah.
and I was
That's
like, okay, that's an interesting way to use displacer beasts.
Yeah, and it's a cool small detail that just makes it work better to have just that little bit of a projection going on. If you're going to do that thing, do that. Or like the way they did the mimic, I loved,
Yeah,
because you know it's going to happen. You're not going to make a Dungeons and Dragons movie without a mimic
without
in
a
there somewhere.
without a mimic. Yeah,
And I like that we, you know, from a narrative standpoint, the characters saw a chest, so they have no reason to not think there's just chests here. And then she goes to open it, and of course it's a mimic. And they did some of that practical too, like the part of the tongue that grabs her leg was a practical piece with like a wire on it that had sort of a quick release. So when they hit it with the sword, it would fall off, and then they can digitally add the rest of that in. So I loved that.
Yeah.
There's a lot to really enjoy about this movie, and I think for me, what it was is that the movie at the heart is just having fun. It is a fun movie telling a fun story that, for me, is very enjoyable. And I when I get done watching the movie, I'm just in a happier place. It's like listening for me to Weird Al Yankovic. Like I can't be upset by listening to Weird Al, and I can't be upset after watching this movie for me. And I know for you, especially the first time, you didn't have that.
The first time I definitely didn't have that mindset. I reluctantly watched it the second time today before coming on the show. It's probably not going to make it onto my standard rotation of movies.
Mhm.
But if I was ever in this situation of someone that's like, "Oh, what movie should we watch? I've never seen XY. I've never seen Honor Amongst Thieves." I would probably be like, "Is there a second option?" But if it wasn't, I would go back and watch it again.
I mean, given how you went into it the first time, I think that's a pretty big change. But also, it goes to that whole thing I was talking about earlier, where like you're a different person every time you watch a movie. So the you that
Right.
watched the movie today had a different mindset than 2 weeks ago when you watched it, and you may have a different mindset if you watch it again. You may never watch it again. It's hard to say, but I think the
Right.
fact that you did is worthwhile because, again, there's a lot to like about it. There are things that can be looked at from a negative standpoint for sure. I'm not saying it's perfect, but for me, it's one of those kind of comforting movies where it's just like, it just, because it's not taking itself too seriously either, but it's not making fun of the thing as well.
Right. Yeah. At no point did I ever, other than them like modifying how some of the stuff worked, I never thought at any point this isn't, they're not advertising D&D as something it's not.
Mhm. Yeah,
I
exactly.
I I have said after the movie was over the first time, I did say, I was like, you could make this exact same movie without the D&D skin on it.
Mhm.
But it is the fact of then it would just be a generic fantasy movie. I do think having the overlay of D&D on it does it definitely, it probably, if anything, gained more traction because more people were willing to go out and see it, and I know for a fact it drew more people to the game itself. Like I
Oh, very
said,
much.
it came out my first year going to Dragon Con, and I went to a lot of the like tabletop RPG panels, um, and a lot of people were talking about it on the fact of like, so I'm new to the game, the movie just came out, what do I do? So it having the concept of D&D on top of a fantasy movie definitely worked. I'm glad that it got made and brought more people into the mindset. So
And
that is a
what I
positive.
think, yeah, and the smart thing they did was that um they made it accessible to somebody who doesn't know any lore.
Right.
On that level, it's just a fun fantasy adventure movie with some silly characters doing some fun stuff. And the
Which is what
more
my wife
you
brought up. Yeah.
Mhm. And the more you
Because
know the
she
lore,
knows nothing about it.
yeah, and the more lore you know, the more of the Easter eggs you're going to notice that they put in there. The more
Right.
little touches you're going to appreciate. And that is where you can tell it's people making it that love the material that they're doing. And for that,
So I,
that also comes through in the end, where it's like watching a movie knowing that the actors enjoy doing the movie. You have a tendency to
right.
like that more. Same thing. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I was trying to find it again, but I don't know what website or where it was that I found it, but it did break down on the fact of like who involved in the movie had already played the game before.
Right.
Uh but I want to say it was IMDb, but I'm not seeing it now on the page that I thought it was on. Um, but I want to say it was a pretty decent 50-50 split as far as people who had never played it, people who knew some of the lore, and the people that were like me that were like, I want to play it as much as I possibly can.
Mhm.
But it was, I want to say that same article or whatever I read did say that they all played it at least once before starting the movie. So they all had a mindset going in, this is how this universe works.
Yeah, that which is smart. It's smart of them to do. Um, yeah, I think it's a fun movie. It's streaming on Amazon Prime right now, so you can watch it there. It's
It
probably on a
is,
couple of other services as well.
it's also on it's on Paramount Plus. That's where I watched it.
That's right. Yep, Paramount Plus too, because it's a Paramount movie. Definitely, if you enjoy fantasy films, I think it's worth a watch regardless. And if you're a Dungeons and Dragons fan, again, like anything, suspend a little disbelief, park your brain just a little bit, and know it's a movie. It's an adaptation of the game,
Right.
and have fun with it. But I'm really glad that you got to watch it, and come on and talk with me about it. So,
Oh yeah, I don't regret watching the movie. I regret going into it with such a uh I guess dark mindset on it, because like the second time I watched it, I did appreciate it a lot more.
and it's tough
So
when you
yeah,
yeah, when you know a thing, when you love something and you're close to it like that, and a movie gets made with it of it, it's hard sometimes to divorce yourself of that. Like one of the things at Dragon Con this past year, I talked about Borderlands, the movie. And
right,
look, that movie is not good. I understand that. It's got lots of faults to it, but at the same time, I didn't have a terrible time with it because while I love the Borderlands games, I know that what I'm getting is not going to be those games. Could they have done a better job of it? Yes. I absolutely think they could have done a better job with that movie. But I still enjoyed watching it. I didn't loathe it. Now, this as an adaptation of a game is much better. Honor Among Thieves is much more the feel of Dungeons and Dragons, and again, that feel of sitting around the table with your friends, playing it than anything else. And that's the biggest feather it has in its cap is it felt like a campaign. So,
right.
now you have a YouTube channel. You talk about video games quite a bit, actually, don't you?
Uh, that is primarily what my YouTube channel is. Yes.
Okay.
I It started off as one thing and then morphed into video games. I'm not I haven't put out as
It
much as I would
happens.
like to in the past, but I'm definitely working towards a more steady schedule.
Sure. What is that channel? Where can people find what you work on?
Uh, so that channel is The Full Run Through, all one word. You can pretty much find that on anything except uh, the site formerly known as Twitter. I am no longer on that.
Okay.
Um, I am on Blue Sky now. That is a new thing that I'm going to try and work on. Uh, if I knew the format of how Linktree spelled its weird URLs, give me a second and I can try and find it.
It's
It's like link,
linktr.ee.
yeah. So linktr.ee/the full run through.
Okay. Excellent.
So it's the full run through on Twitch, on YouTube, on Blue Sky, on Instagram, all of that.
Excellent. And I know I looked at your YouTube channel, and the first videos that popped up for me when I went there were of Sly Cooper and
Yes.
those games.
That series just ended 2 days ago. It
Excellent.
ended on the last day of January. It actually, funny enough, worked out well enough that I was able to upload every other day, and it landed from the 1st to the 31st. So that was lucky editing on my part. But
Hey,
yeah, that series just ended. I'm going to start recording Sly 2 soon. Probably not February. I've got other stuff I'm going to try to release this month, but so it's definitely it's PS2 is what I grew up with. So I want to stick to a lot of those games right now.
Awesome. Excellent. That is linktr.ee/TheFullRunThrough. And you can find the links to everything from there, or just look The Full Run Through on your platform of choice. You're probably going to find it. Awesome. Now, next week, I have something fun coming up, and I'm going to tell you about it as soon as I look at my schedule, because it's the only way I know what's happening. I have Joseph Ard is coming on. We're going to talk about a movie that I have not seen before, Violet Evergarden, the movie. I know that there is a movie called Violet Evergarden, the movie. That is the extent of my knowledge of whatever this is. So that's what we're talking about next week with Joseph Ard.
Is it an anime?
Wait. I believe so.
Sounds
like
if it's Joseph _Ard, it is most likely an anime.
Yes. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week on this show. Now, I do record the show every week right here. I do it live on Twitch and YouTube, twitch.tv/tvstravis, youtube.com/@tvstravis. You can watch it live, check it out as a podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube in a video format. And if you enjoy this show and you were at Dragon Con or are going to be going to Dragon Con this year, I'll be doing the show live there again. And part of what allows me to do that are patrons. So if you can, first of all, if you just listen to the show, I greatly, greatly appreciate that. If you can back the show on Patreon, it's patreon.com/WYHS. That helps me to do things like that, or my live show in Las Vegas, which is coming up at the end of April. And I'm hoping to do more live events this year. So the Patreon does help for that to happen. You also do get things like I'm finishing up the Fall of the House of Usher as I watch through, which was really, really good. Really good. And I'm moving on to my next one. I think I have decided on the series. I believe I'm going to move on to some Star Wars that I haven't gotten to yet. So keep an eye out for that. That is patrons only. They get those episodes. So if you want to hear those, you got to become a patron. And you can find everything at tvstravis.com. Links to all the stuff is there. Tyler, thank you so much for being here. This was fun. We're going to do this again sometime. We'll find a different movie.
Absolutely.
Next time, you can bring the movie to me. We'll see.
Yeah, I definitely have a list, and I think I've given you a handful of the ones that I really enjoy. So
excellent.
No, this was a blast, and I appreciate it because I think you gave me more of an opportunity to enjoy it than I thought I would. Like the movie itself, not just being on the show, but like hearing someone else talk about it and going from that mindset of I'm going to hate this to I can somewhat tolerate this to I might watch it again has definitely happened in the course of this show. So
well, good. That makes me feel good because I do want people to, as I say every week, enjoy movies. And I mean, how can you not enjoy a movie when somebody's saying things like, "She's throwing potatoes"? You know, I loved that character. That character is in 3 scenes, has like 4 lines of dialogue, but they're all gold because it's either she's throwing a potato or
oh, Jonathan!
Oh, Jonathan!
It got me. I didn't mention this, but I love the names. I love how all of the names feel like character names that you would come up with. Like, well, it's not Jonathan, it's Jarnathan.
Jarnathan. Right.
Edgin. Edgin, Holga. Like they're just slightly off of names that you've heard before.
Slightly wrong. Yeah.
So I love
Simon was the only one that got off scot-free.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. That's the character who's like, I can't think of a name. I don't Simon, whatever. Fine.
Right.
He's a half elf.
And he was one of the only non-human characters.
Yeah. That's the best part. But no, thank you so much. This has been a ton of fun. I can't wait to do this again. And I can't wait for next week and talking about Violet Evergarden. I have no idea what I'm in for with that. So it'll be fun.
I'm not an anime person. I don't know.
But until then, just remember to enjoy your movies and let's be excellent to each other.
He's nicking our bits and bobs.
I don't know why that just made me laugh so much.
He's nicking our bits and bobs.